And for our speakers and participants joining us from Africa, a very good morning to you. My name is Wening from the Africa, Europe, Middle East, and Central and South Asia Department of SBF, and I will be your MC for our FYI Festival Africa Edition webinar today on African Fintech opportunity, investing in the fintech market of tomorrow. Festival is an initiative under the Global Connect at SBF program aimed at helping Singapore companies learn more about the opportunities and business environments in overseas markets so that they may land with business deals and or investment projects and eventually localize in their markets of interest with a well-grounded and sustainable business presence for long-term growth. Before we begin, please allow me to acknowledge the support of our partners and supporting organizations in Enterprise Singapore, Convera, and the Singapore Fintech Association. Our webinar today would not be possible without their strong and invaluable support. Now, just a quick reminder on some courtesy points and house rules. Please keep your microphones on mute so that the webinar will not be disrupted. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box throughout the duration of the webinar. We will try our best to have your questions answered during the panel and Q&A segments of the webinar. We also seek your understanding and help in respecting our speakers and their generosity in sharing with you their insights. Our webinar today is entitled The African Fintech Opportunity, Investing in the Fintech Market of Tomorrow. And we have a fantastic lineup of experts who have extensive knowledge and experience on doing business in Africa. So for today's program, we'll start off with a welcome address by Mr. Kelvin Tan, Vice Chair of the SBF Africa Business Group, which will be followed then by a presentation by Mr. Larry Liu, co-founder and CEO at MIB BAAS and partner of Shaka VC. We will then have Dexter, my colleague from SBF, to moderate the panel discussion with our speakers and industry experts, Mr. Kelvin Tan, Mr. Larry Liu, and joined by Mr. Ayomikun Oyedamola Ogunkanmi. He's a legal practitioner from XRSX Services, and Mr. Ruben Lim, COO of the Singapore Fintech Association. Before we go into our program proper, just a quick introduction to Global Connect at SBF. So as briefly mentioned earlier, Global Connect at SBF is an initiative aimed at assisting Singapore companies looking to internationalize and deepen their presence in overseas markets. It assists by partnering with Singapore companies on their internationalization journey through 3 pillars of learn, land, and localize. Global Connect at SBF assists Singapore companies to learn about markets and overseas opportunities. So we do that, for example, by sharing useful resources such as curated market information, FTA advisory, structured training through workshops, and not to mention webinars such as the one that you're attending today. We also organize business missions and learning journeys where Singapore companies can experience and appreciate the local business and operating environments of overseas markets. Global Connect SBF also aims to help Singapore companies land in overseas markets with business deals and investment projects through our platforms for B2B matching, market advisors, and 3 Singapore Enterprise Centers. They're currently operating in Jakarta, Indonesia, Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, and Bangkok, Thailand. Global Connect SBF also seeks to help more Singapore companies to localize by deepening their presence in markets they have entered, leveraging the trusted relationships abroad, and achieving sustainable long-term growth in their markets of interest. So we now have an audience poll. So if you're interested to get in touch with us on Africa and the various assistance available, please indicate yes to the questions for the poll. You can also contact us via Global Connect at SBF's email shown on the slide. So without further ado, so please allow me to now invite Mr. Kelvin Tan, Vice Chair of the SBF Africa Business Group, to kick off our program for today with his welcome address. Mr. Tan, please.
Hi, good afternoon or good morning, my friends from Singapore, Asia, and Africa, a continent which I've visited regularly since 2009, right? So personally, I have been to over 35 countries, and I'm very in Africa. I've dealt closely with commerce, banks, stakeholders on the continent, got involved in cross-border trade, and today I'm very honored to be with Larry, Ruben, and Ayomikun to be welcoming and discussing about the opportunities in the fintech sector in Africa. Before I begin, let me just set the context for everybody. Today, between the period 2020 to 2021, there are over 5,200 startups across Africa. Secondly, half of these number that I just quoted comprise fintech companies. All right. Now, these fintech companies, the 2,500 or so, are already generating revenues in the range of 4 to 6 billion USD as at end 2020. Now, if that's not an opportunity for our guests and our audience out there, then I certainly hope this seminar would make you think otherwise. What is the opportunity? Africa as a continent still is 90% cash. Financial services, excluding South Africa, are still at a penetration rate of 3 to 5%. Now, if all African fintechs were to hit the penetration rate of Kenya, which is by far the most advanced on the continent in terms of fintech penetration, all African fintechs will grow 8x by 2025. What this means for you, if you're an investor, just like myself, investing in fintechs around the world, if you put $1 today, 2022, your money will grow 8x by 2025. Not too bad for a return. The sector is vibrant and part of the booming financial services sector, which is projected to grow 10% year on year up to 2025. Now, for all of us here in this part of the world, Singapore, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Malaysia, right? We are seeing a parallel in terms of the growth trajectory of African fintechs. And if you look at the maturity of fintechs in this region, which I'm sure Ruben can share with us a little bit more, in terms of experience from not just Singapore, but Indonesia, where he just returned, right? Then the potential is certainly there. Now, on this note, I shall, look forward to a good dialogue. Feel free to ask the questions, fire away. I know physical meetings are now very fashionable, but, this gives us the opportunity to bridge the gap. And without further ado, may the conference begin. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Tan. May I now invite Mr. Larry Liu, co-founder and CEO at MIB BAS and partner at Shaka Venture, to give his presentation on build finance infrastructure for Africa. Mr. Liu, please.
Hey guys, glad to meet you all here through the internet. Let me just give a brief introduction about myself. I used to study aircraft design and worked in commercial aerospace in China for some years, and then moved to Africa. At that time, it's more exploration. And then after that, we set up an NGO, we set up e-commerce, and eventually landed in the investor sector, and then and also fintech sector. Across Africa, we invested 7 deals in Kenya, Egypt, Nigeria, Uganda. During the investment period, actually, we realized actually most of the fintech company actually need the fintech to aggregate, because, for example, for the transportation company, they have the tax issue. So how can I create a wallet? Actually, once you pay the driver, immediately the money will goes to the merchant, the border company. The border is actually a motorbike company, and also the driver can split it in 3. So when we invest actually the Ilaria Health, which is actually a medical tech company in Kenya, what they do is actually they provide actually a small diagnostic machine to the clinics, so you don't have to go to big hospital to get to do the diagnostic. So in that case, actually save the money and pay the time for the patient. So even for them, they're actually facing one of the big challenges, actually the finance part, which is actually the asset leasing. How as a clinic, how can I have enough money to buy the machine? So they have to do the asset leasing model. So they are not specifically want to focus on that area, but landed in that area. So that's actually give you an idea, how I ended up actually in the fintech space. Great, that's actually a brief introduction for me. Any question and anything you want to know more further about me, welcome to drop me an email later on. Great. Wendy, can you present the? Okay, I think I can do. Let me see. Can you show the presentation for me? Yeah, I think now it's okay. All right, cool. It's just a bit of slow. 1 minute.
Hi, Larry. You should be able
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
What is that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you should be able to control Larry.
Yeah. Yesterday's okay, and then 1 minute.
We'll take some. We'll be let.
I'm trying to go back. Currently, I can click and go to next page, but actually, it seems like I actually go back to the previous page.
Oh no, like this. From our end, we control for you.
Okay, please, can you just go back to the first page?
Yeah. So when you need to go to the next page, you just say next.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Sorry about the technical glitch, everyone. Give us a moment. Yeah. Okay. So Larry, you can start your presentation.
All right, cool. Okay. So as you guys actually know, right now global venture capital market is a bit of like cooled down because of the different reasons. I don't want to list all of them, but in Africa, it's still very hot. I think the growth right now among all continent right now is actually #1. They actually 150 growth actually compared to the previous year. And then at the end of June the 30th, we already reached actually 3.3 billion, which is actually last year, the total number of fundraising is actually 4.1 billion. So it is growing pretty fast. And then the leading sector, sorry, trying to, yeah, this is actually the graphic actually showed people to know that right now is like every year by year actually growth is like 100%. So 2021 actually we hit actually $4.4 billion investment in the continent, and then by 2022, by half a year we already reached 3.1. Yeah, cool, got it, Dexter. The next page. So the main sector actually leading this actually transaction is the fintech sector, because actually as you know that anything cannot grow without fintech support, without financial to support. If I want to do a motorbike business, I know there's a great opportunity for me to ride a motorbike and then do business, do deliver food, people, but still I don't have the money to get a motorbike. So how can I get money? So the access to funding, it's a challenge. So in Africa, there are 3 types of major fintech companies per se. The first one is actually lending, as we said. Every sector need a bit of money to start off the business. That actually the company like Tala, like Branch, like some other international company, they're in this sector. The second part is actually about the payment, the local payment, cash in, cash out, hard currency to digital currency. No, yeah, this page, yes. The hard currency to digital currency, and they also move their money more easily. So that's actually a lot of companies doing that, like Wave, like M-Pesa is doing that. M-Pesa right now generate $900 million per year as a revenue in Kenya only. So those are the second type of fintech company per se in the big sector. The third one is actually like a cross-border payment, remittances, like Cheaper Cash, like MFS Africa. What they do is like Kenya, if you want to send money to the neighbor country, I still have to use the US actually currency system, which is actually the money goes to the States and come back to goes to Uganda, which is cost of time and also a lot of money as well. So those are a lot of companies trying to build different wallet among different different country, and then trying to move money more easily and freely. So those are the 3 type of fintech actually right now is booming. Of course, actually the insurance tech and other fintech is also booming at the same time, but those are the 3 major type. Next page, Dexter. Yeah, this is actually just a breakdown. So payments and remittances actually I break it down, and lending. Those are the 3 major sectors. Blockchain right now is actually growing pretty fast, but different countries have different regulation. Most of it don't allow the cryptocurrency to digital to the actual currency actually to convert. So you can only do trade between the different cryptocurrencies. So as more countries open up, I believe actually this can be the Web3 in Africa also can be a booming sector. Next page. Yeah, but still, in our opinion, because I lived in Kenya for like 8 years and traveled different countries, I still believe right now fintech in Africa is still the early stage because of the conveniences, affordability still is not there, and then traditional bank most of the time cannot really support the people in a very efficient way. Usually they like collateral. I need your car, I need your property, I need something to be collateral. So still, it's a bit hard for the normal middle class and especially the low bottom classes actually to get access to finance. Yeah, next one. Yeah, in Africa, currently, in general speaking, still the opportunity is big because of the underserved people are huge. About actually 50% people are underbanked, and then but still in the other way, actually less than 5 people have access to credit. This actually can be even smaller in the country like Nigeria. I think it's less than 3%. But with the digital lending, probably is actually increased a bit, but still digital lending cannot cover the whole of it, and also the ticket size is pretty small. Yeah. Next. So what we think right now is like is a great opportunity. The same way like Africa jumped over PC stage directly to the mobile. I think also from the financial sector is the same things happening, because Africa have the in terms of demographic, we have the huge youth population, and also we have the huge growth in the population per se. So in that case, actually the youth population are tech savvy. They're more easier to adopt the technology. They might not really need a physical bank per se. As long as I can move my money freely, I'm happy. And then for the internet space, is like currently the internet penetration is doing pretty fast in Kenya, 80% right now. In Nigeria, I think it's 70%, above 70%. The other countries growing pretty fast as well. In the meantime, because of the, for example, Chinese supplier bring the cheaper phone to Africa continent, so we are changing the feature phone to the smartphone in a very quick speed. Even the company got listed in China as well. I think the valuation is that it's $10 billion. So what we believe is actually the youth across the internet will be moved to fintech directly, because fintech can serve in a better way and also can satisfy the demand, financial demand anywhere, anytime. Next. So, and we as we mentioned about it, we have invested some deals in Africa. Most of it actually aggregated with financial product, but still that's not the core business, but they have to do it because they don't have any partner to empower them to do embedded finance. So 2 years ago, I joined hand with another partner of me, and then we actually provide this kind of solution in the market. I'll just give a brief about what we're doing at the moment, other than investment. All right, Dexter, next. So what we do is actually, we do embedded finance, or we call it the BaaS, banking as a service. We actually provide fintechs with wallet. We provide actually non-fintech with wallet and the payment solution, and even lending. So in that case, actually, it's not like I'm going to the bank to get a financial product, but it's like the financial product is looking for you in different scenarios. No matter it's actually transportation, logistics, the finance is looking for you rather than you have to go to the bank. So that's what we provide in the market. Next. Yeah, this part is actually just traditionally in the other markets, like they have the bank, they have the platform. So in Africa, we acquired a bank and we have built up the platform actually fit for the local context to provide actually support the partner. For example, for I believe a lot of fintech in Singapore is pretty mature and pretty established. I believe a lot of companies already have the new product, but how to launch in Africa, we can also support you to launch a product within weeks because we have the license, we have the platform. Yeah, thanks. Next. This part, we don't want to introduce too much about product because if you're interested in the solution, we're going to talk more. But so the bank we acquired actually is a microfinance bank in Kenya, amount of 14. We spent actually 2 years actually doing acquisition. So any partner or any investor want to enter the space, actually definitely willing to have a talk. Next one. Yeah, 4 type of partner currently we're supporting. We support fintechs actually to provide more products. If you're lending product, we can add the wallet. We can help you to add the payments sections. But if you want to build a new bank from scratch, we can help you to launch everything, from 0 to 1 within weeks. And the big tech, like the e-commerce, we help them to actually build a wallet. So that's actually what we provide in the market. And we also help the traditional banks to do change of the system or add a new product. Next one. Yeah, next one. I think this is already established. This is actually how we do it, right? So we help the e-commerce build the wallet and then help their merchant to enjoy the supply chain financing, and also help their customer to enjoy the actual buy now pay later. Yeah, next one. Yeah, literally that's actually the brief. The key thing I want to say is like if the one thing you could probably take away from this conversation is fintech situation is so different from Asia in a way, because in Asia and America, the traditional bank are so strong. They also upgrade the technology according to the demand. But in Africa, traditional banks are very slow in terms of like providing the product in a very easier way. So the opportunity is massive. And then for the tech company, if you want to grow, you need actually finance to be embedded to empower, capacity of buying, in capacity of moving money more easily. So those are the things actually, that's the key thing I want to highlight. The situation is different. And then the financial demand is even stronger compared to the other continents. Yeah, that's my sharing. I want to keep it as brief as possible so I can welcome more conversation in the next phase. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Liu. I'll now hand over the session to my colleague Dexter to commence the panel discussion with our speakers. Dexter, over to you.
Thank you, Wenning. Very happy to have Mr. Kelvin Tan, Mr. Ruben Lim, Mr. Larry Liu, and Mr. Ayo Mukun on board as our panel. So today we'll discuss about some fintech outlook and opportunities in the continent, especially for Singaporean companies. Maybe I'll direct the first question to Kelvin, because you are doing the opening just now. So we start with the opening address personnel. So maybe this question, as the CEO and CIO of a Singapore-based VC managing a specialized investment fund focused, among others, fintech and insurance, where do you think is the biggest potential for investors to explore in Africa burgeoning fintech environment? Mr. Tan?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll speak from experience. Of course, I think Larry is in a better position.
Sorry, Mr. Tan, we can't hear you. Maybe there's some issue with the mic.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Actually, Kevin, I can hear you perfectly.
You can hear me perfectly?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, okay, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Right, okay. No, I was saying that I think, I shall speak from experience. And I think in this respect, Larry's experience is much more diverse than mine, having been living there for 8 years, right? I have a preference. I would say, I would call it a bias. It is what it is, right? I like Francophone West Africa a lot, right? I think the statistics show that outside of Nigeria, right, it is growing massively at 13 to 15% per year. And, they do have one good thing in common, which is a CFA or a XOF, right? So that standardization, in terms of currency governed by regional central banks is actually a good thing for fintech innovation. Like how M-Pesa was actually able to ride the rails of the East African region very well. Therefore, it grew massively on the back of telco rails, right? So I think Francophone Africa, especially those under the common currency, CFA or XOF, where there's clear certainty in terms of FX convertibility, will be very, very interesting. And I think that's where actually, the Afreximbank, through the IPAPS system, is actually making some progress in terms of cross-border FX systems, payments, and everything. Now, within Francophone Africa, there are 25 countries, including Central Africa. I will just pick out Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, amongst others. right? The elephant in the room, of course, is Nigeria, but I'll let Mr. Ayo comment on that subsequently. Personally, actually, we have invested in a fintech, not in Francophone Africa. Actually, it's in Nigeria. So it's a B2B lender for crops and commodities, where we have pre-post harvest lending, and we help convert and give early payment to the farmers near Abuja. Yeah. So I'll stop there and pass it over to the other panel discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe from IU or Larry's perspective, like Mr. Tan, I know he's very well versed in our Francophone Africa region. He's actually our market expert in the region. What about Larry and IU, or even maybe Ruben, if you ever dip your toes in the Africa fintech market? So, and any feedback from you? What are the up and coming countries that might be the burgeoning fintech go-to countries for Singapore company or overseas investment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Okay. I would say he's perhaps right in that the currency certainty for Francophone countries is quite a big plus compared to sort of in Nigeria, where there's some restrictions on use of currency and being able to export. So I think I definitely agree that Nigeria dealing with the currency issues is a big impediment that could kill your business. But the other side is just pure and the core size of the economic population. That's why Nigeria is sort of the unavoidable space in Africa. It isn't the easiest market. And, there are definitely other markets, I would say even Angola, obviously Kenya, although Kenya is a bit crowded now, but I say Angola, Rwanda, and although they don't see themselves, they're not necessarily the same as the sub-Saharan markets, but I say North Africa as well, Egypt, Tunisia, there's some opportunities there, although they're slightly culturally different from sub-Saharan Africa. But I say yes, Nigeria is probably the most profitable market, but it's the hardest market. So, if you may want to try somewhere else first, Ghana although Ghana too is a bit tough, but certainly I'd say that Nigeria is probably the toughest market. But if you can break into Nigeria and you have the funding, which is the key thing, you have the funding to compete with the incumbents and funding to go into the hinterland, into the forest land, the farmland, then there's a money-making opportunity there, certainly.
Yeah, Dexter, I would say it's like depends on, for example, what do you want to do, right? So, for example, you want to build the payment infrastructure, you probably go to a smaller country, right? And then that would be easier to build infrastructure. You don't have to compete with the telco, you don't have to compete with big banks. But if you want to do a bit of added value, for example, the more established country will fit. For example, Kenya is actually like for a lot of added value fintech. There's a lot of fintech. I would say also Egypt is also a market. I feel like people always forget about it. It's still Africa. It's not sub-Saharan Africa, but it's growing pretty fast. One of the companies we invested called Helen, they actually raised $120 million last year after COVID because of at the beginning they do red Helen business. Later on they actually changed it to digital bank, and then buy now pay later, this kind of product, and then they grow pretty fast. And then Egypt is a country actually with a huge booster in terms of like agriculture is exporting. Industrialization is pretty much mature. They export product to the other countries as well. They also have tourism. They have corridor of shipping. So they have a boost. In my opinion, also you have to look at countries like the economy boost. What is actually the backbone of the economy? If the economy is growing well, the internet industry is going to be grow faster compared to other location. So that's actually what I want to add on. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Larry, Mr. Tan and Ayo. Maybe for Ruben now, I think, to warm you up, thank you for joining us. I think Ruben has been traveling around, ASEAN and Pacific region. I see him going to Southeast Asia with some of our country as well. So maybe Ruben, as a cross-industry and not-profit initiative intended to be a platform designed to facilitate collaboration between all markets participants in fintech ecosystem. Where do you see Singapore fintech companies' key strength to complement the fintech needs of African market?
Hey, thank you guys. Thanks for the question. My name is Ruben, Singapore Fintech Association. I think the strength that Singapore Fintech brings to the table and to all our friends and partners in Africa is that we actually have a depth of a very wide range of fintech companies available. So fintech, largely speaking, most people may just maybe relate to wallets only, or maybe some will just relate to P2P lending in some countries. But largely, I think within Singapore context, you can break it up into the business model. It could be B2B, B2C, or you can look at B2B2C. In terms of the spread itself, there's InsurTech, RegTech, remittance, payments, you have capital markets, you have also and even crypto as well. So given a wide range, I think what's important is that for a market like Africa, first and foremost is really like what our earlier speaker has mentioned about, identify the specific market itself, because Africa is a huge continent. For some of the people who may not even realize, Africa is actually bigger than the whole US and China put together in terms of land mass. So it's such a huge and diverse country where, in a sense, when it comes to investing in those countries, it's really important to identify the right opportunity. So back to your question, in terms of the strength, I think what Singapore has to offer is that we have so long there is a need, we have something that's available. But I think let me rephrase that question instead, where not so much of just what can Singapore bring to the table, but also where partnership with the right fintech in Africa is important. I don't think the intentions for Singapore fintech companies to go in all by themselves and venture into the market. I think through an opportunity like what SPF has been arranging for us and through this kind of platform, is where if there is any fintech right now listening in from Africa and you identify that, look, there is something that you feel that you can do more, maybe in terms of tech stack, maybe in terms of know-how, that you feel that a Singapore company can contribute, let SPF know, let us know, so that we can find the right partners to work with you together. Because I think in many sense, Singapore companies do not have the necessary know-how and the relationships and understanding the nuances in each country. So Singapore and Africa, in terms of fintech, can work together very closely in the event that we can find that there's a space that we can all work on together. And also, I think another thing I just want to call out is that when I saw the earlier presentation, Singapore, from the ASEAN perspective, is actually very similar to the funding wise as well. So fintech actually draws majority of the funding from the various tech space as well, and that is actually largely very similar. So I think in that sense, I think it bodes very well for fintech, and I think really between fintech in Singapore and fintech in various parts of Africa, Africa is largely used as a continent, but I think there's really a lot of different opportunities here that we can work on together.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Ruben. So maybe continuing on the Singapore companies that look to venture into the fintech sector. So maybe from your perspective, do you think what are some of the potential challenges Singapore companies might face when investing or entering the fintech market in Africa?
Sorry, directed to me as well. Is that a question for me? So I think fintech companies, so I wouldn't say it's something specific to Africa market only, but in general, most of the time when they enter the market, a new market, it's really about not knowing where to start and where to begin. Not knowing what's the right space to go into. And there's a lot of due diligence, a lot of market intelligence is very, very important. So having a right partner to show the way, having a right partner like our earlier speakers, especially from Kelvin, and also from our lawyer friend, helps a lot. So I think it's all about doing the right due diligence as well. And I think in a sense also, and partnership is really all the more important. So if there's any companies and fintech that is on this call today and identify that, look at potential partnership that we can really look at from Singapore, or maybe you feel there's a need. So for example, if you are already serving the banks through lending, but perhaps you identify that there's a reg tech element, regulatory tech or compliance tech element that you would like to add on, but it's not something that is available, or maybe something you feel that there's better solutions out there from Singapore, then that is where you can then onboard Singapore solutions. And that's earlier to your question where the Singapore strength can come in to supplement that, so that you can create a win-win situation for everyone.
Thank you, Ruben. Okay, we have a question from one of the attendees. Our very good friend, Mr. Amit Jain, is he's our director for NTUSDF. So Mr. Jain actually asked this question. Maybe I can direct to Larry or Kelvin or Ayo. Most of the fintech firms in Africa are growing on the back of funding. Few have been profitable. What happens when liberal VC funding runs out? If many of these fintech firms folds up, it could seriously undermine user confidence and result in the reversal of fortune in this sector. So maybe Larry, Ayu, or Kelvin can answer this.
Yeah. So your question is like, if there's so many fintech right now, it's like why they're not profitable?
So the main question is what happens when the funding dries up for these fintech companies in Africa. So what will happen thereafter? You know, how can they go past this stage of being able to grow with the backing of funding?
Yeah, that's a good question, because look at the global situation. It's unstable, right, at the moment. I believe actually some of fintech actually very profitable. For example, at least actually for those lending companies, they're profitable per se. For payment, if you take example like a Pesapal, this kind of company, they actually didn't raise money that much. They can still sustain because they do transaction, they do cards, they do the payment sector. So in my opinion, actually, some of fintech actually grow in the fastest speed and then need more money to expand. Some of them actually a bit more conservative and grow with their own margin, with their own profit. So it depends on which sector they are in, and also how aggressive they're actually pushing the business. Yeah, it's not all of them actually like funding based. Yeah.
Actually, I just want to jump in here, and I don't know whether Ruben agrees. Whether it's an Africa issue or Latin America, I mean, if you don't make money, that's it. It's okay for you to fold up, move on, right? It's also okay for startups to fold up. I don't think there's a mission out there for anybody in this world to go and save a startup that cannot make money, right? I think the days of liberal VC funding are also over, right? I can tell you that as a VC myself, our LPs are super stringent on going for profitability. You can kiss goodbye to revenue multiples. So for all of the fintech startups out there trying to raise on revenue multiple, if you don't have ARR, you don't have consistent clients, I'm sorry, welcome to the new world, right? I mean, this is how it is, right? And I think, you know, it is what it is. I think those that survive, those that are able to show prudent, cash flow and profitability, they will emerge as champions, irregardless of whatever situation they are in, So that's just my kind of like comments on Amit's question. Thank you.
Ruben here,
Yeah.
maybe I'll just take a quick step to that. So I'm so sorry, my friend, just a very quick one. That question is something that addressed not just only limited to Africa, but it's really to every part of the world that we are experiencing. And I think for us, what we are seeing right now is a more of a consolidation. We are seeing more scale ups. We are seeing more scale up coming out right now. So I guess in a sense, it is actually a very good opportunity to see the stronger players emerging, and you will see a trend of a lot more merger and acquisition. You will see more of these smaller companies coming together to become bigger and stronger. And I totally agree with Kelvin that some of the weaker ones, it may not be terrible idea. I think what is should they be gone? But I think what is really important is from the risk perspective, is really understanding whether if there is any concern that one may have when it comes to using those services, it's really more to measure up and see whether if it's okay. So things like wallets and stuff like that, there is limited like risk because it's only really what's there in your wallet. when it comes to other businesses, most of the time you pay per use, you pay on services. So should they even fall to the business standpoint, it should be minimal risk.
Are you have something to feedback?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't even necessarily think that's factually correct, at least in Nigeria, that the biggest fintech companies are definitely pushed by VC money. The popular ones like Flutterwave and Paystack, maybe. If I look historically, the real fintechs that have the direct integration with the bank, so I'm thinking of System Specs, thinking of companies like InterSwitch, eTransact. They've been in the market in Nigeria for about 15, 20 years, and they have the direct integration that Flutterwave and the Paystacks they build upon, So I think that, and those companies are very profitable. They've been profitable for years. They raised long before there was access to foreign funding. They raised from local investors, and local investors in Nigeria typically want profit immediately, profit within the first 2-3 years. It's a very aggressive timeline for them. So I would say that the fintech opportunity is there. What funding allows you to do is scale up faster than ordinarily would be. But if you still don't have that product market fit, especially in payments, there's and Larry knows a few of the companies that I work with in Nigeria. In the lending space, they are making a lot of profits. It's ridiculous. It's even with restrictions and targeted, a little bit of targeted vision on foreign-owned companies. Still, the revenue it's obscene sometimes actually. So and the market penetration is still very low. So I think VC funding, those that will fail, and those that have that product market fit will be successful. There's still a lot of untapped demand in the market, certainly.
Two points actually I want to comment as actually you addressed it. Number one, actually the banking industry in Kenya, even though the scope is not that big, the size is not that big, but the profit ratio is actually among the top in the world. And then you will never actually, in Nigeria, I think the bank actually lending at 24% to 30% per annum. So that's actually like crazy, right? So finance in Africa should be profitable. That's number two. Like when we also look at the deals, actually invest in some deals, actually we look at whether you are a businessman first. Before we talk about like you have a great idea, you want to innovate the world, you want to disrupt the bank industry. Are you a businessman? Do you understand the business essence, and then how can you generate cash in a very good way? So I think actually, as Kevin said, the world is changing, but also still there will be, if you do financial product in Africa in the proper way, you should be actually generate profit faster than even the other startups, because that's closer to money, right?
Thank you, Larry, Ruben, and Mr. Tan, and Ayo's feedback. I see, Mr. Tan, you are answering Omar's question. I'll leave you to do it. Thank you, Mr. Tan. Maybe for Ayo, I think we have left you out for quite some time. Maybe this question, as a legal practitioner with years of experience advising companies seeking to operate in the tech space in Africa, can you lend us some of your insights on the regulatory environment and latest development and potential challenges for fintech companies operating or seeking to operate in Africa?
Actually, it's quite relevant to Omar's question because we talked about central bank toughening up on Flutterwave, right?
I would say, to be honest, we're a bit in a flux right now. So previously, the problem was the regulators didn't know what the fintech, or should I say, the new type of fintech, because the old companies were essentially technology providers to banks, and it's a bank-led system. So the real fintech revolution of Flutterwave is this sort of third-party service providers that are coming into the market. So the government is now aware of them, and we did work recently on the national fintech strategy. Hopefully that should come out this year or next year. And I think the government is now trying to collaborate with the fintechs. So I think, if you're doing any fintech in Africa, your first approach should be compliance as opposed to disruption. And trying to cooperate with people. I think, there's this idea that you have to, there may be some, corruption and that exists. On the line, there's no denying that. But I think what's even more important is, substantial compliance with whatever regulation that there is, and to the extent that you can, and to the extent that your business can support it. Because once you do that, the government knows that there's an opportunity in fintech. So it's not so antagonistic. But at the same time, there's also the pressure to protect consumers, to make sure that, the market is stable and there's system stability. So I think that the first approach should have, coming to any African country, is that, you should be willing to cooperate with the government and comply as much as you can with regulations, within limits. I think the second thing is also just trying to, it's getting better, but there's cultural differences between how businesses work in Africa and how businesses work in other parts of the world. And there are also nuances of how African businesses deal with foreigners. Because typically, historically, the foreigners we've worked with are British, so it's a Western style of doing business. I think it can be so difficult for Asian companies sometimes to adjust to the culture. So I think it's being patient to understand that there's a method to the madness. It may look chaotic, but there's actually some system in place. Just trying to understand that we are also, getting used to working with new cultures as well. So having that willingness, to understand the culture, and I think also being careful with who you take advice from. I think if you come to Africa or come to Nigeria, there are a lot of experts, in the startup space. There are a lot of people that, say a lot, and, you have to be careful to make sure that any information you actually get is accurate and is, it's relevant. There can be conflicting information sometimes. And, I would say, especially because databases and things like that are still being built up, you need to be careful that whatever information or data or, whatever you're basing your decisions. Hello?
Hey, Ayo. I think there's some internet issue on your end. Can you hear us?
Okay, you just need to be focused on accuracy of whatever. Yeah, I think that's where I rounded up on.
Thank you, Ayo. I think Kelvin did bring up the reply to Omar regarding the Flutterwave case as well. Okay, maybe open question to all the panelists here. I think this is one of the questions that I would like to ask. What are the markets that have disappointed you or disappointed investors so far? I think, Larry, previously you did have some investment in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia as well. And because of the civil war, the internal strife and things didn't turn out very well. So maybe to understand from, the specialists here, what are the markets that have disappointed you? And also, second question to follow up, what are the markets that are hungry for fintech expansion, but lack of proper support and infrastructure?
So I will go first.
Yes, Larry. Then maybe Kelvin.
Yeah. That's a very interesting question because we did actually have invest actually 2 deals in Uganda. Most of them actually didn't do that well because of the, as we said, actually, if you go to a smaller country, you probably do the very fundamental thing, that's okay. And then you need a very strong team. So that's actually one. If you go to a smaller country, probably the strategy is different from Nigeria or Kenya. That's number one. Number two, what are the second question again, Dexter?
what are the countries or markets that you think are hungry for fintech adoption but lack the proper infrastructure? I think there are some talks previously in Zimbabwe for adoption of fintech and so on. But what are these countries that that is hungry for fintech adoption or fintech sector to infuse into the economy but lack the proper infrastructure or system to run it?
I think other than the major countries, example, South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria right now is building up with the banks, most of the countries actually still lack of infrastructure per se. So that's what I want to say. But case by case, actually different country might, in different sector, have a different demand. Yeah.
Maybe Ayu or Ruben?
I would say, in terms of, I wouldn't think, I think it's important not to necessarily think about it as country by country, but there's also the element of the urban versus rural divide. So I think in most countries in Africa, in urban centers, there's some sort of, functioning financial system. It may not be the most, developed, but I would say there's a bit of saturation in most of the major cities. So I'd say if you're really looking for sort of golden egg or the hidden jewels, I'd say is looking to things in farming, things to do with mining, things to do with outside of the cities, agent networks. In terms of services that didn't necessarily work in Africa, I'd say QR codes. For some reason, a few companies experimented with QR codes a while back, and that didn't work. And I think apart from Nigeria, card-based systems don't work. Generally, I think most people prefer EFTs or wallet systems or some sort of mobile money as opposed to using your cards. So I'd say those are card-based systems haven't necessarily been the most successful aspect of fintech in Africa. I think those are.
Lost eye again. Anyway, in general, I think compared to Singapore, the infrastructure is definitely different layer. Different layer. So yeah.
Hi, Ruben here. Maybe I'll just take a quick step. While I definitely can't call myself an expert or very familiar with the Africa market. But I think one thing that I just want to call out is that I saw a survey that was conducted by UOB with about 5,000 respondents, consumers, for the ASEAN market, ASEAN 6 market. And interestingly, it has identified that Singapore is actually at one of the lower fintech adoption from the consumer standpoint. And so in that sense, I think when it comes to fintech opportunities, especially for B2C, while I can't really take the Texas questions head on about which are some of the markets that were more disappointing, but I would like to think that from a general sense, every market will have failures and every market will have success. But I think what's important is that fintech itself, or any tech for that matter, but especially for fintech, the opportunity really rises in occasions like this. Is where there's really unbanked, where there's really so-called maybe lesser infrastructure, but with high internet penetration. So those that are B2C would really stand a much higher chance of success. And that kind of, well, I can't speak for Africa, but if I take a reference from the survey that I saw from UOB for 5,000 consumers in the region, interesting, like I said, Singapore is actually ranked third or if not fourth in terms of fintech adoption. And the higher one are really the likes of Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. And I think that if I were to do a parallel, there will be a lot more opportunities in Africa for all these companies.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Larry. I think thank you, Ayu, as well. I think he just dropped off because of the bandwidth issue. Okay, so Kelvin, I would like to say thank you to Kelvin as well. He will be dropping off the call in a while because he's busy with another thing. Thank you for the support today. We'll continue with Ruben, Ayu, and Larry.
Yeah, maybe just some closing notes on my side. I think when people look at fintech, a lot of people focus perhaps very little on the fin and over focus on the tech, right? I don't think there's a need to over tech things. If you are in Nigeria, you're in Kenya, you're in whatever African market, you have connection, you got ecosystem, don't, you know, kind of like obsess yourself with building the tech, you know, because how, you know, there's only going to be so much good tech in the world, and, you know, you can't be a custodian of that good tech. Think about, you know, I'm doing a little bit of PR here. Think about coming to Singapore, right? Set up here in Singapore, join Ruben's Singapore Fintech Association, network with his counterparts, and then white label the tech that the fintechs in Singapore have already built. It is very unlikely that a Singaporean fintech, you know, will have any aspiration for Africa unless they hit kind of like unicorn status, because most of the growth plans are predicated on Southeast Asia. And if they grow, they'll either go eastwards, you know, or westwards out of Singapore, which is South Asia and everything, right? If an African partner comes in, they're very happy to strike a collaboration. You license the tech, you customize it locally, you grow your market. Now that is already a solid, you know, fintech in the making, a big fin and a small tech license from Singapore DNA, right? So this is my parting note, right? Because I feel that a lot of startup founders raise money, overspend on tech, and it's not easy as well to find talent in Africa today. Talent for tech is global, right? So you know, if you give a choice to a programmer, you know, to work in, I don't know, Bali or as a digital nomad versus, you know, Tangier, or, you know, hang out somewhere in Mozambique, you know, the choice is obvious. So think about that as well, you know, talent and tech, you know, how you can leverage Singapore for that. And with that, you know, thank you very much. I shall leave everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelvin. I will choose Maputo over Bali, by the way.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Secret. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you, Kelvin, for that. Okay, so maybe Ruben, I think one more question for you, even open to Larry and Ayo as well. What projects do you think in terms of the fintech sector can revolutionize not just Africa but the world? You know, any ideas, you know, especially, you know, for Ruben and Larry and Ayo, you guys are in the sector for long already, so maybe you can share on your experience or your thoughts.
It's a very thought-provoking question, and I think revolution is a relatively big word, because there are also many things that we are also attempting to even change in this part of the world, in Singapore, in ASEAN itself. So I think first and foremost is really how we democratize finance, where I think for a start, even when it comes to investment options, if before we talk about revolution, where people will talk about metaverse, you know, where we can all live in one space with regardless of time zone, and we can all trade and buy using smart contracts. And then of course the other major trends. So a couple of trends, the big one that you talk about would be metaverse, would be on DLT technology, where you can then cut short a lot of all this transaction time and cost. Another big one will be sustainability. And in fact, on this topic, I would think that sustainability is actually something that potentially Africa as a continent, and even in those separately, all the other countries have a very large potential. And let me explain why. Right now, in terms of the global trend when it comes to sustainability, a lot of times we're talking about carbon credits. And when it comes to carbon credit, what is important is that you need to have you do not want to greenwash it. You want to make sure that you have quality carbon credit. And a lot of good carbon credits usually comes from large forestation, comes with large greens, you know, and then put in the necessary tag to make sure that you can validate, and then they are of top quality. And then of course, when you say that the tree that you are putting a credit on is still there, you have a necessary license or tag or a blockchain to validate that it's still there. So I think what I want to call out is that, to your point, Dexter, there's a big revolution and potentially there's a smaller revolution. So the big one will potentially be some of these mega trends right now that we are seeing, where Africa could very well be leapfrogging, so that because everyone is starting on the same footing right now. When it comes to blockchain, when it comes to DLT, when it comes to sustainability, not many people can say they are much wiser. So I think that's one area that you can potentially leapfrog. And on the other hand, when it comes to the smaller part, I think it's really about how individuals and consumers can really come on board very quickly. Because within fintech itself, you will have noticed that in the past, every movement would probably need about 10, 20 years for it to take place. But with tech advancement, with internet penetration, with mobile penetration, everyone can just come on board. Fintech can just revolutionize within the next 5 years or next 3 years. So that itself is a big speed up. And I think when it comes to African market, if I don't think I'm an expert, but if I were to draw a parallel to what we see in ASEAN, it's not just only it may have been a wrong impression to say that the unbanked are those who may not have the necessary purchasing power. Many of them could be actually well-to-do, but just do not have access to the bank. And I think in that sense, in that approach, they will actually have a lot more access to all these fintech solutions like wealth tech. So and this is also, even in this part of the world, in Singapore itself, we are also pushing very hard to help our company digitalize through their payments, to help individuals have more options to invest, and also then to gain bigger entry into a lot more things that was not made available to them in the past. So I would like to see that this wave will also be continue in the Africa region.
Larry and Ayu, any feedback on this question?
Maybe insurance. I think it's something that people haven't really focused on in the African market at all. Something that I think there's opportunity to sort of manage risks. Living in Africa is a risky business, so I think that the reason why insurance hasn't grown is that people haven't maybe been able to articulate the problems and market it properly. So I think that's something that just an idea, just people should think of. Yeah.
Yeah, Larry.
Not much for comments on this question.
Okay. So thank you, Ruben, Larry, and Ayo, and also Mr. Kelvin Tan. Just drop off. I think it was an insightful session. I'll hand the webinar back to Wendy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Dexter, and also our panelists. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's session. We hope that the webinar has provided you with useful information, inspired you to explore the fintech markets of African continent. There will be several festivals as shown on the screen coming up. If you are interested, please scan on the QR code provided on the slide or register to contact with us for more information. So on behalf of the Singapore Business Federation, I would like to thank you, our audience, and our partners and supporting organizations, Enterprise Singapore, Convera, and the Singapore Fintech Association.